don't interrupt our presenters, okay? And also we have, for those folks that need hearing assistance, we have a loop here. It's outlined by the blue rectangle over here, so please avail yourselves of that hearing loop if it's something you can use. Do we have any first-time attendees tonight? Okay, raise your hands. Welcome, folks. Glad to have you. And has anybody accomplished any milestones, like, you know, finished their Winter 46, or, you know, anything?
I got my taxes done.
You're better than probably most of us. I do know one. Yes, sir. Went to Antarctica. Okay, great. Very nice, very nice. Okay. And I know we've had one person recently complete the entire Finger Lakes Trail as a section hiker. Matter of fact, it's one of our presenters. Patty, please, where are you, Patty? Patty, where'd you go? Oh, right there. Raise your hand, okay? Patty just completed the entire FLP. Okay. Announcements. Dave, you got one?
Yeah, I've got two. I have two. I'm Dave Nichols. I'm leading the High Summit Honor Society nomination committee this year. This committee recognizes those who have contributed to the chapter for at least 10 years in ways that go above and beyond most volunteers. We recognize those people because that's what makes this organization really hum. There's two plaques over to my left, your right, that list the roughly 50 or so people who've really contributed so strongly to this organization that they really deserve special recognition. So this year I'm looking again for nominees. If you have someone in mind who has really gone above and beyond to help out GVC over the last 10 years, please send me an email. It's in the Geneseo, this announcement is. I really appreciate it. The second thing is, you've noticed some of the warm weather recently? I bet you're all just anxious to pull your bike out, dust it off, oil that chain, and get your helmets out and begin riding again. GVC is one of the few chapters that offers bike rides throughout spring, summer, and fall. We actually purchase our own insurance in order to do so. We'll be starting up hopefully in May. I'd love to start in April, but we can't trust the weather for that. If you're interested in getting on the email list to join some of our bike rides, again, it's going to be in the Geneseo, Dave Nichols, dnnichols@gmail.com, and I'll get you on that list. Our bike rides are not road races. They are generally along canal trails or rail-to-trail paths at a really moderate pace. They're really meant for enjoyable exercise, social enjoyment with others, and getting out and enjoying the scenery. So if you're interested in biking with us, send me an email. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Bruce.
Hi, I'm Bruce Thayer, the chapter's Finger Lakes Trail Steward. The chapter maintains about 10 miles of trail just north of Good. The chapter maintains about 10 miles of trail just north of Cornell. And we're having our first work day on April 5th. We do 3 work days a year. I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet. It's got, this is a sign-up for the April 5th day. If you can't do April 5th and you'd like to volunteer, just cross out April 5th to the left of your name, and then I'll add you to our list of people that I send out information to, so we can sign up for the next ones. The other ones are in June and September. So anyway, we got the April day is going to be cleaning up after winter. We've got lots of branches down, things like that, maybe some water damage to the trail. There aren't going to be any bugs. It's not going to be too hot, and there will be wildflowers, guaranteed. Let's see. So the trail maintenance is a great way to give back from all the trails you've been hiking. People have been maintaining those trails. You can give back by helping to maintain the Finger Lakes Trail. The trail registers on our trail have lots of comments about the good shape the trail is in and thanking us for keeping it in good shape. But some of the things you see in there are sometimes suggestions for improvements. So I'm going to finish with a reading from the Barn Trail Register. This is the Trail Register on Barn Trail, June 16th, 2024. Trying to get to Burnt Hill Lean-To. Have a 5-pound bag of ice on top of my pack that is killing my mileage. We, all caps, need pack stands at the registers and other places, like tops of hills. It would help so many long-term hikers. Please, my bag is begging for more stumps just so I don't have to pick up 40 pounds off the ground. Just about waist high. Without water and my new solar umbrella, I don't know if I could do this hike. Underlined, ice water is very important. So, hope to see you on April 5th. I'll be out in the lobby. If you have questions, I can answer them then. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Sarah.
Hi, I am Sarah Mastro. I am your Expo Chair. You will only have to hear from me a couple more months, I promise. Save the date, June 14th, 2025 is our 26th annual Outdoor Expo. Couple of notes, if you are on social media, please go to our Facebook page for the Expo. Like and share that with people. There'll be more announcements as we get closer on that page. If you haven't signed up to volunteer for your 2-hour shift and free lunch yet, I will be over on the stage after the presentation, and I will be here next month as well, so you can get signed up. And the last thing, also, if you want to come over and let me know about a club or organization you haven't seen there and you'd like to see there, please do so after the program. So thank you very much. June 14th, 2025.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, Jackson, I'm not going to forget you.
Hi, everybody. There's nothing new at the bookstore. I'm sorry to report that, but I do want to thank all of you who over the last several months bought at least one calendar to support our chapter and ADK in general. Thank you all. You were great. Debbie Holt, Debbie, and she's going to wave over there, has recently been cleaning her hiking library at home, and she's brought in a number of hiking resources that she is more than happy to donate to your personal library in your home for free. They're over there on the stage to the right of the table, and I brought a few of them over just to whet your appetite. A number of titles on Alaska, a number of titles on Yellowstone. Here's a nice looking book on wolves in Yellowstone. So they're over there, they're free. Don't get hurt rushing over there at the end of the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, I would now like to ask Katie Kuzik, our program chair, to come up. She will be introducing our presenters for the evening.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. Before we get into it, I just want to announce the topics for the next few programs. Next month, we'll have Andrew Zepp of the Finger Lakes Land Trust speaking on how conservation happens. In May, we'll have our own Jerry Fletcher, who will talk about his transcontinental adventure on Amtrak. And in June, we will have our own Luke Nelson, who will be speaking on hiking the O Route in Patagonia. So please come back for those presentations. But tonight, I'm excited to introduce our presenters for tonight's program, who happen to be friends of mine, Patty Mangarelli and Jim Miller. Patty is the secretary and regular hike leader for GVHC. She is an ADK 46er. The list goes on. She just completed her end-to-end hike of the Finger Lakes Trail, and she's also a champion pickleball player. Jim is our own trails co-chair. He is an aspiring 46er, and he is a champion baker. They're going to talk about... Oh my God! Yes, Jim is an unofficial ranger. Thanks, They're going to talk about their trip to Peru last fall, where they hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu and explored the local culture. So please give a warm welcome to Jim and Patty.
Is it working? You can hear me, right? Can I talk? Talk some more? All right, the front row can hear me. All right, so this is the trip that we did in September. And I'm going to be the warm-up group. Patty is the headliner. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Inca culture and a little bit about Peru. But then Patty's going to walk you through the Inca Trail all the way out to Machu Picchu. So this is where we were in Peru. On the coast, we were primarily around Cusco and Lake Titicaca, that's where Machu Picchu is. Peru is an interesting culture in that the prevailing winds come from the east. So of course the rainforest is east of the Andes. The Andes are in the cloud forest, and then the coast is really a desert. It's a coastal desert.
Excuse me for interrupting. Can everybody hear okay? No. Jim, why don't we do this? Let's use this correctly.
This better? Wow. That's a lot better. Okay. So we hiked a lot of times in the early part of it through really cactus and really a desert kind of landscape. And that's the group. There we are, hanging out on the rocks. Of course, Patty's the only one who hasn't taken a pack off and sat down yet. She's ready to go. So the Inca actually started out on the coast of Lake Titicaca. This is a view from the boat of Lake Titicaca. They arose and then moved down into the Cusco area around 1200 AD. This is a schematic of Lake Titicaca. It's way up at the top. It's supposedly the highest navigable lake in the world. It's not the highest lake. That one's in Argentina. It's a crater lake that's at 21,000 feet. Lake Titicaca is about 12,000. You can see here's our lowly Great Lakes down at the bottom. And the deepest lake is one that's in Russia, Lake Montana. So the Inca moved from Lake Titicaca and they moved down to the Cusco area. And they were down there, settled in there for about 200 years. And in the early 1400s, they started a massive expansion. And over the next 100 years, down to the early 1500s, they pretty much consolidated most of the western coast of South America. So they moved all the way up north, all the way up to the Ecuador Bolivia region, and all the way down to Argentina. At the peak, there were about somewhere between 10 to 15 million people in this area, and it was ruled by the Inca. The Inca were really the ruling class. And there were only probably 15 to 40,000 Inca rulers over this large population of people. There's no written language. They never had a written language. So a lot of the information we have about the Inca is from archaeological expeditions, some oral traditions, and then the stories that the Spanish told, or they recorded when they arrived in the 1500s. When the Spanish did arrive, the Inca were under a civil war, so there were a little bit of some unrest. But between the war, internal war, and the war with the Spanish, in the next 100 years, about 90% of the population died, the indigenous population. And that was largely due to outbreaks of smallpox and measles. So that was really devastating to the population. And now the Inca culture and economy really relies a little bit on this Andean philosophy of ani, which is about mutualism and reciprocity. So the culture was very much, there was no money, they had no currency in South America, in that part of the region. The previous cultures of the Incas. There were no markets. It was pretty much a shared environment. People farmed, primarily agricultural, and they shared resources. When the Inca came by and they started to consolidate all this land, they turned that sense of communalism into a statewide, centralized economy. So they came into an area and they would have the agrarian farmers would be working. They would capture up all the surplus food, and they had ways to store it and then redistribute it. So the people had pretty much access in case of famine or a bad year in terms of the environment, low crop yield. They had food that was stored that could be shared amongst them. So it was based on this sort of centralized economy and food distribution and storage. They also required conscription, so everyone had to work for several months out of the year. And that was mostly put into, sometimes into the military, but often into just building. So the Inca were big builders. They built fortresses and cities and roads. And I'll show you a little bit of that as we go through. Because they had no written language, they had to keep track of a lot of details, right? Population size, food distribution. And they did that on this strings, this series of strings called quipu. And then the spacing of the knots, the size of the knots, and the color of the strings all had some kind of decimal arithmetic information that they could keep track of all of the population census and the food. So a lot of that, we have a little bit how to interpret those quinoa, but not complete. Now the Inca, even the Quechua people today still live by this Inca code of do not steal, do not lie, and do not be lazy. And it's really true, and I'll show you some examples. It really feels like it's an individual, entrepreneurial kind of population. You can see this sort of sense of communalism still existing today in the salt mines of Maris. So if you've ever gotten pink Peruvian salt, they have come from this salt mine. So this is based on a spring that passes through an underground deposit of salt. So the water that comes out of the spring is very salty. And over the last, really started probably in around 700, they started to build these evaporation wells, right? Where you can see the walls are built up, the salty water is accumulated, and then left to evaporate. And then the salt is harvested at the end. And the way this works is about 4,500 of these evaporation wells of the salt mine. But all the people collect the salt together. It gets graded to very high quality salt, and then lower quality salt, and then sold off as a cooperative. And then the income is split between all the people who work for the different wells. So again, it's this sort of sense of communalism, but also individual work that sort of keeps everybody participating in it. The other thing that you often see is weaving. So there's a lot of women along the side of the road. So in Cusco, just sitting on the side of the road, weaving in different places. And again, it's this sort of this individual entrepreneurial motivation where they sit and do some weaving. And I brought some weavings that if anybody's interested in at the end, you can come up and see. I have a couple that I picked up. So the Inca apparently valued their weaving more than gold. The gold and silver were sort of thought of as religious significance rather than monetary significance to the Inca. So much like the Spanish that they didn't value their gold as much as their weavings. Even in the cities, you can see this sort of same individualistic thing. So this is a street view in Cusco. And you can see there's all these little individual shops that are opened up. And even in Lima, when you drive around in Lima, there's all these small individual shops. It's almost like a warehouse district where they've opened up a garage door and they're selling out individual wares. So again, very independent people. So I have a little musical interlude. So this is just a gentleman on some alley in Cusco, just playing his harp. He was there for most of the afternoon, while breakfast. Farming. So farming, as I mentioned, there was an agrarian culture. And even today, most of the farms are small. They're almost like community gardens with little pea patches. You can see here's on Ollantaytambo Island, which is on Lake Inca. These small little garden plots, which are all individually farmed in sort of a communal way. Now the Inca built a lot of terraces for farming. Of course, it's a very steep, mountainous country, so in order to create enough level land, they had terraces. And as you drive around Peru, you see these terraces all over the countryside. Now, if it was me and I was going to build a terrace, I would just go to a hillside and shave off little sections to make flat. But that's not what the Inca did. What they did is they really built these terraces in a very sophisticated way. So they're all lined with stone walls, and all the stones are hand carved. They had no iron, so these were all hand carved with soft metals and grate with sand to fit together. And then the area where this planting was done was also very sophisticated. They started off with layers of sand and stone, and that allowed for good drainage during the rainy season. And then a layer of clay. And that would retain moisture during the dry season. And then they put the topsoil on for planting. And so you can see the stone walls, you can see the various terraces. And in this bottom picture, you can see some stones sticking out, which are actually steps to get up from one terrace to the other. And then in planting, they use, I don't know if people have heard of the three-sister system. It's corn, beans, and squash. So you plant corn first, and then the stalks of the corn is available for the beans to grow. And then beans, because they can fix nitrogen, restore the soil that's been used up by the corn. And then the squash, because of the big leaves, generates a really good mulch. So it's sort of the very efficient way to utilize the same land over time. The Inca were also very good agronomists. They developed many different species or varieties of potatoes and corn, quinoa, beans. And they did that in a sophisticated way. This is the terraces at Moray. And you can see it's in this sort of domed place, right, with this almost like a basin where all the terraces go down to the bottom. And people have measured the temperature difference from the bottom of the moray to the top. And it can be a 25-degree temperature differential. So between the difference in elevation and the way the wind comes in around the mountains, there's a big temperature differential. So it created microclimates at each one of these different terraces. And when people excavated the various terraces, they found that the soil at each of the terraces was derived from different places in the region. So the Inca thought to have been using this as sort of an experimental agricultural station, where they would have different microclimates in the different terraces, different soils, and so they could test out different varieties of plants and potatoes and crops in different climates. And they could do a lot of different interbreeding and stuff, and then select the plants that would grow optimally at different microclimates. Okay, so this is just a representation of the kind of food that you can find here. This is the market in Cusco. This is just a array of potatoes up at the top. I couldn't catch the whole thing because the pano on my phone died or ran out before I got to the end of the array of potatoes, but there's at least 20 different varieties of potatoes. And then this is the market of Cusco, and you can just see the array of vegetables, different kinds of vegetables and fruits that you can buy. And Patty will show you some of the fantastic meals we have. Now, Peru is largely a Catholic country, Spanish influence. And so we happened to be, when we were in Chinchero, there was a festival of the Virgin was going on, a big Catholic ceremony. You can see these big arrays of religious Catholic symbols on the left. But at the same time, the Quechua people retained their old cultures. And at the same festival, they had a dance that was to celebrate Pachamama, who's the Earth Mother. And after the dance, they had a ritual where they fed each other and gave each other drinks to sort of celebrate the wealth of materials and food sources that came from the earth. So they sort of incorporate both the religious significance of their Catholicism along with their old traditions. And this is just another group arriving at the festival, and then a couple of sort of middle school girls who had a display of birds that Luke was very interested in identifying all the birds in the region. So this is another example of how the Quechua people continue to incorporate their culture into Catholicism. This is a painting from 1753. It's the Cusco School of Painting, where the Spanish taught the resident population to paint in the European fashion. And it was a way to teach them about Catholicism. And it was also a way to generate a lot of paintings to fill in the churches that they were building. But you can see this painting by Marcos Zapata in the very conventional display of the Last Supper, but instead of the lamb, the main feast is a guinea pig. And guinea pig is a popular food source in Peru. So again, they've sort of maintained their own culture, even though they've been influenced by the Spanish Catholicism. So back at Lake Titicaca, this is just a view of Puno from Lake Titicaca. We visited 3 different islands while we were there. The first are the floating islands. And these are islands that are actually formed from reeds that are collected on the water and are actually floating. They just build up this hole, they bundle up the reeds, and they float on the lake. And this is sort of, I tried to get a picture of it to see what that looks like looking down the water. But on these floating islands, there's houses, and people live on these floating islands. These were first formed about 500 years ago when people that lived along the shoreline were forced out by the invading Incas, and they were trying to get away from the attack. And so they moved out onto the islands, these floating islands. And now there's about 120 different islands of these, and they have to get refurbished. The new island has to be rebuilt every 30 years, so they're not long lasting. We also stopped at Ollantaytambo Island. We stayed with a host family, that was the woman who we stayed with. And Ollantaytambo Island has 2 of these peaks. I don't know if you can really see that well from the topographic picture there, but on each of these peaks is a temple. They're pre-Inca temples. One is to Pachamama, which is the Earth Mother, and the other is to Pacatara, which is the Earth Father. And this is the view. We hiked up to Pachamama, and you can see across the island, that's the other peak with the Pacatara temple. And we hiked up there essentially to see the sunset, which is very nice. But the cool thing was it happened to also be a full moon. So we could actually see the full moon rising above the temple of Pachamama. Really nice. We also visited Tequila Island. And tequila island is known for its very intricate weaving. And in this case, the women do weaving, and the men knit. And they knit using 5 needles. So they have 3 needles that are holding the textile in place, and the 4th and 5th needle are actually weaving. So they can make very, very, very fine, tight knitting. Here's just an example of that. And the hats are designed in a way that if you're a single man, you have white at the top, and when you're married, you make a hat that's all red. So just kind of display your marital status and availability. We also were able to see a wedding procession, and the 4th one back is the bride. Women in Peru, in traditional dress, often wear multiple skirts. It kind of serves as like the old hoop skirts from the Victorian days. It sort of makes the skirts flare out. But the bride in this case, I think, had 30 skirts on. That's a benefit. And again, so it's, the people maintain their very traditional culture. Now, I mentioned before the stonework that's at Inca, and they're well noted for that. This is an example of stonework at a temple or a site, Ollantaytambo. And you can see how this is all carved in a way that the stones fit together so perfectly. And this was all done in the absence of any smelted iron. So this was the only thing. They were still sort of Bronze Age in terms of their metallurgy. And so yet they could stake these stones fit so precisely together and be still standing 500 years later. All those terraces and all those stones in the terraces, are still intact 500 years later. This is just some more examples from that same site. You can see in the upper left where the stonework at the bottom is a little cruder. That's a structural stonework. It's just holding the place together. But as you go closer and closer to the top, the stonework is much, much finer. And that's because that's the temple of the sun. It's the religious site, so the stonework was just done more trim. And up the top with these huge slabs, you get an idea, here's a group standing in front of them, of stone that they were building for that temple. Now my final slide is to just show you that Inca, in addition to building terraces and building incredible stonework, also built roads. The road work of the Incas was originally initiated by the Moray culture, but then extended by the Inca to about 25,000 miles worth of road work. I showed you the map of the Inca territory going all the way up and down the coast. But they had no wheeled vehicles. So they built all these roads to help with the transport based on pack animals and porters. So this is another map of the Inca territory. At its peak, you can see the lines of the roadworks that are running north and south. There are 2 main roads that ran north and south, one along the coast, one higher up in the mountains. And in this inset, this is the area where we spend most of our time. There's Cusco, I showed some pictures from there. Moray in the middle there. And then on the far left, you can see Machu Picchu. And there's a little red line that goes a loop down. That's the Inca Trail that we follow. That Patty's going to tell you about. If you started on the right, we went along that trail and then did it to Machu Picchu. So that's it for me. Patty, you're up.
Just a minute.
Trying to sell their wares. There were people who painted that would come up and want you to buy their paintings or things
no panhandlers, no nothing. It was incredible. And the people were just so open. Just due to religious No, I think it's partly the Andean culture of hard work, don't lie, don't cheat, don't be lazy. And I think that's built into everybody. And there was a fair enough police presence, right there, especially in the touristy areas. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No. No, we were in the malaria testing. You know, if we had been in the rainforest, it might have been different, but yeah, I think if you depending on what, if you didn't have that bad, I guess they want to get it up. Yeah. Testing.
How high are those terraces?
Lake Titicaca? It's at 12,000 feet. I don't, in terms of it, I don't know big.
Testing. Testing.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Jim, nice presentation. Thank you.
Hold it closer. Hold it
Closer.
horizontal.
Okay. So I am going to do the Inca Trail. It took us 4 days to hike the Inca Trail. We went with pack paddle and ski, and Jim, Luke, and Jeff went on the trip along with like 3 other people. So we did the hike Inca Trail, and here we go. When we got to Machu Picchu, you'll see my picture. It doesn't look like this. This is a stock photo. I didn't do that. Okay, wait a minute.
Katie, we can't hear you. You gotta speak louder into the mic.
Okay, it's not where I need to be. All right, so Machu Picchu is a 15th century Inca citadel, which is located in the Andes Mountains. And as Jim pointed out, it's in northern Peru. It was discovered by Hiram Bingham in 1911. He was a Yale University professor. Obviously, Machu Picchu did not need to be discovered by somebody from Yale. However, he found it because he said, do you have anything else that is around here? And people said, yeah, we got this thing up in the woods. So we went up there and we found Machu Picchu. Unfortunately, he took a bunch of artifacts that Yale University and Peabody Institute has, and they're trying to get a lot of the artifacts back. Machu Picchu is located on the Urubamba River, which we will see in the pictures. It's a valley which is renowned for its sophisticated dry stone walls that are fused together with huge blocks of stones without mortar. So the Incas built Machu Picchu without any modern tools. And you just wonder, like when we were there, how did they move all those rocks? It's like the pyramids, basically. This is not an actual representation of our trip. It is a representation of kilometer 82, way over to the left, over to Machu Picchu, but the timeline is not quite correct. And I stole it from Luke. Thank you, Luke. Preparation for the trip, we traveled to Lima first, and we spent a couple days in Lima, and then we flew to Cusco. And Cusco is about 11,000 feet elevation, which got us ready to go to Machu Picchu because the highest point at Machu Picchu was about 14,000 feet. So we did stay in Cusco for a few days and acclimated a bit. We use Diamox for the trip for the elevation sickness. I do have some things over on the table. I included my Passport Health. I did go to Passport Health and got some immunizations before I went. I got my Hep A, and they also recommended, what is it? Typhoid, okay. And they gave me Diamox, and then I did get an antibiotic in case I got Hep A while I was there, just in case, and I didn't have to use it, thankfully, yay. We had a lot of warm weather on the trip, and it was very dusty in September, and sunscreen and bug spray are highly recommended. I got eaten alive at Machu Picchu. I was the only one. They really didn't like anybody else, but they loved me, and I was covered with bug bites everywhere. I wore shorts to Machu Picchu, and that was a bad choice. So that is the preparation. And please feel free to check out stuff at the table. I brought some of the weavings and some of the gifts that I bought. Oh, and I'm styling my Peru sweater. So lots of things to buy in Peru. We started at kilometer 82 on the Inca Trail. Day 1 of the trek was this picture. We did go to the Temple of the Sun beforehand. F.A., our guide, he's the gentleman in the white. He was excellent. I can't say enough about him. He is fluent in 3 languages, Quechua, Spanish, and English. So he got to talk with the porters, who were all native speakers of Quechua. But he would speak Spanish to like the tour guide, the van driver, and anyone else that we met on in any of the towns, and then he spoke English to us. It was amazing. So he is actually featured in this book by Mark Adams. It's over on the table. In that book, he's a little bit younger, and the book says that he had traveled the Inca Trail over 300 times by the time that book was written. So I can only imagine how many times he's been there up until now. Because he was going there on Monday when I talked with him. This is our group, and most of the porters. We had a group of 8 people, and we had 15 porters for our group, which really isn't too bad. I will test you guys later and ask your comments about what you think about a group of 30 porters, like how big was their group? So keep that in mind. We had 15 porters. We carried all of our clothes. They carried our tents, our sleeping bags. They gave us a wash bin. They gave us a little bin with a soap every day. They gave us hot water. They cooked for us. They were amazing. We started at kilometer 82. Oh, no, I hit the wrong button. So this is day 1. I added my stats so that you could see that we traveled 7.15 miles. We did only 700 feet of elevation gain, and that little green dot that's there, we traveled down towards the left, we went over a bridge, and then we started to come back up into the valley where that X is. So that was our trek. This is us just starting out, and we're looking back at this mountain.
We can't hear you.
What did I do to it? Can you hear me now?
Hold the horizontal.
Is that better?
It's all right.
That's not very good. I hit it, I guess.
Hello.
I'm very good at breaking things. I break the printer at work and the fax machine. I don't do fax. It's just me. I have like this electromagnetic bubble or something.
Testing.
I'll try not to break it. So we started out on the hike, and this is, I'm going to switch. This is, we had the trail all to ourselves. I don't quite know why, but FA said, we're going to do this, and by the second day we got to see more people on the trail, but the first day we had the trail completely by ourselves, which was amazing. This is us on the railroad track. If you take the train all the way back to where our driver dropped us off, the train does go all the way to Machu Picchu, and I've got that little pink thing up there in the slide. That is Mountain Veronica that he wanted to show us. So, had to add it. This is us on the trail for the first day. On that second picture, when you see FA's shoulder, and you look down the trail, you can see the Urubamba River, and we're going to get to a bridge down there, and then we're going to actually come back up through that pine grove to get to our first campsite. So this was our first stop along the trail, and we got to meet the porters. Like I said, there were 15 of them, and everything that they carried is right there. I think one thing to point out on that last slide is we actually had one porter who carried a toilet for our group. That was his designated job. He had to carry the toilet, and we paid him extra at the end because he had to do that. This is Paulie. He was our cook on the trail. He made amazing meals. I did not quite know what I was going to eat on the trail because I'm gluten intolerant, and he actually made me gluten-free soup where everybody else got a soup, but I got different soup. It was amazing. So they gave us fresh avocado on the trail the first day, and those big pieces of corn, the native corn in Peru is much larger than the corn here in America, and it was amazing. Had to add that. My last name in Italian means to eat, so I had to add the food. I just want to show people too, we did not have plastic silverware. They carried all the plates, the silverware, the table, the tents. They carried everything through the trek with us, so that was pretty amazing. This was our first stop, and I wanted to add this because along the trail, you see evidence of the Incan civilization, and nothing's damaged. You know, the Inca culture was 1500 AD, and 500-600 years later, nothing's broken, nothing's damaged. Nobody went around and broke the fountain. I mean, the fountain's not working anymore, but people have high regard for their past in Peru, and it's a huge boost to their economy if we travel to Peru, and so they really revere everything from the previous civilization. This was our checkpoint. I wish I had taken a picture of us on the bridge. FA actually had us pick up a small stone when we got to the bridge, and there was a rock down below in the river, and it was pretty far. I thought, he was like, you know, I want you all to take this rock, and you're going to throw it and try to hit it on the rock. I thought, oh, that's going to be easy, and I was like the last one, and nobody got it. So I guess nobody got the golden prize, but I don't know quite what that was, but nobody got it. So, and this is a picture from across the bridge, and that was the trail going over the other side. So that's where we were going to head to. This was our first campsite of the evening. We were in a farmer's field, and there was a cow not too far past that left tent. I was pretty glad that it didn't come into the tent. We all shared a tent. We all, they had a mat, they had sleeping bags, we had a pillow, and so this, as Jim said, all of the field, like you go through roads in Peru, and you'll see that all the hills are terraced because the Peruvian culture, they all don't farm as much any longer, but the farming that they could potentially do is very evident in the hillsides in Peru. This is day 2. We left that site and we started heading up to a high plain, and this was supposed to be not such a bad day, and I thought it was horrendous. We had about 4,000 feet of elevation gain, and it was a tough day. It was warm, and I didn't think this was going to be the tough day, and it was. So I was a little unprepared for the day. I think I ate too much at lunch. I will tell you, don't eat so much at lunch. My GI system paid for it, and so I was at the back of the group. I was the sweep. where we came from. There was a point where Luke climbed up a little bit higher, Jeff did too, I stayed down below, and this point is looking back at, like where I showed you the tents and the terrace, that's looking down at this point. So our tent site was down in that green village down there. That was pretty cool. Day 2, getting dry, still dry, arid, very dusty on the trail. This was a village that we came across and we all took a break, and there were no shops. You could not buy a soda, you could not buy anything to eat really. And the people who, the cooks and everything, they were there, but there was nothing to buy on the trail, so don't think that you're gonna be able to buy a Coca-Cola. These were the markings for the trail, and then just out of the blue, this beautiful, I think it's an orchid, I'm not quite sure, but I had to add it because it's so beautiful. We stopped at a checkpoint. All our passports had to be given to FA, and they had to show them to the person at the checkpoint, and so more of the climb. This was lunch. I ate too much of it. Don't eat too much lunch on day 2. This was the climb to the high plain, and as you can see, we're now kind of going out of arid into forest and jungle, and that stream on the side, I thought to myself, gee, wouldn't that be nice to dip my handkerchief in that or get some extra water? And I was so glad that I didn't do that, because you will see at the top of the high plain, llamas are standing there pooping all day, and you don't want to drink the water. Don't do that. This is a viewpoint. We finally got out of the forest, and this is down in that valley. That's where we came from. We hiked up to that little village, and then we went up on the left, and now we're up almost to the high plain. This is the high plain. When we got there, we scared all the llamas, and they were they were running up the hill. And this is our second campsite of the trek, and I don't know, we were at 12,000 feet? Yeah, so it was very high. We all were taking our Diamox because it was a very tough climb to get there. It wasn't strenuous. You weren't rock climbing or anything like that, but 4,000 feet in one day is a lot at that altitude. This is the next morning, looking down into that valley again that we came from. Pretty view. Oh, and day 3, we're starting day 3, and we did 7 miles, and we did 3,200 feet of elevation gain. So not as much as the second day, but still pretty good. I don't know why this slide is off, sorry. This is the point in the hike where people were traveling in groups, and people were passing us, and then we were passing them, and we kept flip-flopping. And as people passed us, there was a group that was wearing, our guides had green shirts and yellow khakis, and we passed another group, and they had purple shirts and black pants. And there were a lot of them. There were 30 porters in that group, and I said to FA, wow, that must be a huge group, because there's 30 porters. And so I guess I just want to ask you guys, how big do you think that group was?
15.
10. 15, 10. Okay. So they had 4 people. They had 4 people, and they each had a tent, they each had a toilet, they each had a bed. A bed. Those porters carried a bed for those people. Now, those people were rich, and so, there's no level of extravagance, I guess, that you can get to on this. And in one way, I'm well, that's a little extravagant, but they did we had to hire local guides, and we hired local people, and 30 porters had a job that day. So that was a good thing, but just saying.
Did the people actually walk, or were they carried?
I'm sorry, I don't hear that. They did walk it. They were fast. They were from Florida, too. And we're walking up to Dead Women's Pass, and I thought that was the day before. It wasn't, so I was like, oh man. So, you know, when you watch videos, I watched some videos before I went, supposedly walking up to this point was the hard part. And really, I have to tell you, day 2 was harder. So we're walking up to Dead Women's Pass, and that valley down below, that's where we came from. That's where we walked past that high plain where the alpacas were, or llamas, I don't know which one they are. And that's, down in that valley is where we camped. So now we're getting to Dead Women's Pass. And so in this picture, there's Jim. And then to the right of Jim is that purple porter. That was the group of 30 porters with the 4 people. And then we're actually at Dead Women's Pass. And all the way over to the left of almost to the end of the screen, that's where we came from. So this is Dead Women's Pass, and it's called, I couldn't pronounce that, sorry. But there's the picture of what Dead Women's Pass is called. And I wish I could zoom in. If I could zoom, so I can zoom in a little bit, and it says the progress for our trip is at like 50%. So these were really cool markers on the trail because they actually told us where we're at on the trail by the elevation, that little dot. And then it also told us how far along on the trail we are. So we're 50% of the way there. Just kind of, oops, sorry. Oh no. I'm not good with technology at all. It's a miracle I'm here. So this is Dead Women's Pass, and that right there is the dead woman. You can see her face with like her forehead, and the nose, and the chin, and then she's laying down. So that's why they call that Dead Women's Pass. Can everybody see it? Yeah, it's right there. So we have gotten to Dead Women's Pass and we're continuing our hike. This is all of us. So there's Jeff and his wife Peggy. Peggy was a trooper because Peggy's not a hiker, and she actually went on this trip and she did wonderful. And then there's the lady in blue is Kat. That's from a lady from Washington. That was my roommate. She was awesome. And then F.A. So this is looking down, you know, like who wants to go down when you know you got to go back up again? But we did it, and I guess I just want to show you the trail too, because I didn't think that the Inca trail was going to be like stone. We were walking on stone. The Incas actually created this path, and it's been maintained, so it's pretty amazing. So this was lunch on day 3. And it was very busy. There were a lot of people there. Our cooks were there. We actually ate in the tent, and lots and lots of groups there. And that's where we actually saw the group of 30 porters with the 4 people with 4 tents. They each had their own toilet outside the tent. It was amazing. So getting up to the second pass, we found a pond, which wasn't very big, and this lovely bush, and then my friend Kat. And then looking way in back of Kat, that was Dead Women's Pass that we came from. This was in the valley. F.A. said that in their spring, that little marshy area is full of water. We were in there fall. No, we were in there in spring because it was September. Sorry. Just beautiful bush and another road sign. Lunch again. Oh, this was a really amazing area because there were actually alpacas that were grazing, and you can actually see the tents. This was a busy area also. This was where other people were going to camp for the evening, but we didn't stay there. So this is where we were going to camp for the evening for night 3. And we were told, don't use the toilets there because they're disgusting. So we did not use the toilets. The area that we camped at was very, very dusty, and it was kind of difficult to move around. It was like plateaued, and it didn't really have a path. And then there were a lot of other groups at this site also. I added the picture of the people with the silhouettes because this is the first time in 3 days that we had cell service, and everybody was on the peak. That was actually somebody in our group that they kind of look short and you think maybe that's an Incan, and it wasn't. It was somebody in our group. This popcorn, I have to tell you, was one of our snacks. They always gave us a snack, and they always fed us soup before our meal. And the popcorn that evening never tasted better. I don't know what they made it from, but it was the best popcorn I've ever had. And then I have my gluten-free meal, and the food choice was still amazing. The food was amazing on the trip. Polly made me gluten-free pancakes, so I had to add a picture of that. And then this is also my app from for day 2. And we did not get a lot of elevation gain, only 1,200 feet, because it was mostly downhill to Machu Picchu. So we were leaving here and heading to Machu Picchu. This was going to be our last day on the trail. And we were all sad because we had to say goodbye to the porters. And that morning, the evening before was kind of hazy because there were a lot of forest fires in northern Peru. And the weather, it rained that night actually, but the ground was dry when we woke up. And FA took us up to the high point, which was just above where we camped. It wasn't very far. And on the other side of that ridge, we actually saw these mountains, and I don't know the name of them, but he wanted to point them out to us, and they were spectacular that we actually got to view them because it had rained the night before. When we said goodbye to the porters, we practiced, we had to do like a little play for them. And we didn't have to, but we did. We gave them all their tips for the trip. Each individual on the trip got a specific tip, and each one of us handed out a tip to the porters. And then we did head, shoulders, knees, and toes. You probably learned this. And only we did it in Quechua. And so we did Uma, Gaston, Mugochaki. And then they all kind of laughed and they were like, oh, okay. And then at the end, yeah, well, I won't add that. So anyway, they were pretty amused by us, needless to say. So this is day 4, and we are heading down to Machu Picchu, and this is what the trail looks like. It's pretty rocky, but down this stairway was our picture with F.A. and Luke and Peggy, and that's you, Jeff? And then Jim, and then maybe Rick and Jama. The foliage on the way down, now you can tell we're kind of getting into rainforest. Again, after hitting the high elevation of Dead Woman's Pass, and we're getting to the Urubamba River again, which is where Machu Picchu is located, right off of the Urubamba River. This was lunch on the last day. They provided us lunch, and then the porters left, and we all were watching them go down the hill. There was a vantage point where we could see the porters going down the hill. This is the going to the sun gate. When you arrive at Machu Picchu, you don't really arrive there. You go through the going to the sun gate. It's about a mile left to Machu Picchu, And when we got to the going to the Sun Gate, FA had us stop and have us think about like maybe someone who we missed or had passed and what we were grateful for. And it was a really special moment on the trail. This is my stock photo of Machu Picchu. Doesn't look very good, does it? It was pretty hazy when we got to Machu Picchu. It was pretty hard to see because of the forest fires. We had beautiful weather and the hiking was hot while we were there in September. Cool clothing is recommended. FA wore that white shirt most of the trip, and I kind of wish I had a white shirt also. That was long sleeve. When you go to Machu Picchu, make sure you cover yourself. Your arms and legs should not be exposed. The bugs are ridiculous. So this was as we were getting to Machu Picchu, this picture on the left, this was the Crying Wall. There are several rock formations that are on the way to Machu Picchu where they seem like they're oozing substance from them, and they call them the Crying Walls. This is us at Machu Picchu. We had a little tour of Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu allows 5,000 visitors per day. And because we arrived there, because we hiked, we had preferential treatment the next day. We got to board the bus earlier and not have to stand in this like half-a-mile line if you didn't forget your passport, which I did, sorry group. We would have gotten to Machu Picchu a little bit earlier if I hadn't forgotten my passport and had to go back to the hotel. But the evening before, we were kind of waiting for the bus. The buses from Machu Picchu town, or Aguas Caliente. Thank you, Luke. It means hot water in Spanish, but I don't really know why, because they don't really have hot springs. So Machu Picchu town is in the Urubamba River, right alongside the Urubamba River. And the buses run to Machu Picchu continuously. There's probably 30, 40 buses that take people to and from Machu Picchu town. You can walk up. You don't walk on the road. There's a set of stairs that climb straight up. I don't recommend it. Very dusty, very steep, but it's cheap. And we saw people walking on the side of the road, which seemed pretty dangerous to me, but anyway. So FA did a wonderful job. He's a professor in Peru, and he did a wonderful job of teaching us about Machu Picchu while we were there. But we were all pretty tired, and so we wanted to go to the hotel and have something to eat, so we kind of jetted out of there a little bit earlier than he probably would have liked. Luke probably has some great pictures of the llama. There were llamas on the lawn at Machu Picchu, but unfortunately I didn't get any of those pictures. The next day we went back to Machu Picchu, and this is a picture of the really amazing stonework. This divide in the wall is done because the Incas took into account when there's earthquakes and the rocks move about during the earthquake. This is an expansion line for Machu Picchu in the rocks. And so FA kept telling us how wonderful and amazing the Incas had been with their construction methods, because it's been standing for 500 to 600 years already, and it's not moving, like, because of all the earthquakes that happened, and it's all still there. This was a really interesting picture. On the left-hand side, you'll see a picture of like a doorway and an entrance, and that was like in a completely different area than where we were standing. And then this picture to the right, this stone in the middle of the picture, you'll notice a lot of the stones in the corner have a crack, but one of the stones has no crack. It was like they made that stone specifically for the corner of that room. You'll notice, everybody can see that? That middle stone right there, that was pretty amazing. This is also a picture of Machu Picchu, and when we hiked to Machu Picchu, where these folks are up above, that's where we came into Machu Picchu, and then we climbed down to get to the bus, where the buses were. Oops, wait a minute. I did not want to change that just yet. Sorry. The round circles that you see in this picture, anybody know what those round circles are?
Skylights.
What is it?
Skylights.
Skylights. No, those are stone structures that are on the floor of this area, and I thought it had something to do with like cooking or a kitchen, but what that was a celestial bowl, and what they would do is fill that bowl up with water, and they would be able to look at the stars in the reflection of the water. So this is 500 or 600 years ago, and they're figuring that out, so that was pretty amazing also. Machu Picchu also has its own drainage system, and so this drain on the left feeds into a system of drains throughout Machu Picchu so that Machu Picchu does not flood. They do not want water in the kitchen, they do not want water where you're living, and so the drain system takes the water away, carries it out, and dumps it somewhere convenient. And then the second picture also shows the elevation of Machu Picchu. We were up pretty high, not as high as Dead Woman's Pass, but we were at like 8,000 feet elevation. As I said, the buses take you to and from Machu Picchu, and this is Aguas Calientes, or Machu Picchu town, where we stayed for a night. It's amazing also. It's a walking town. There are no cars in this town. You get to this town by train or hiking, and there's a little truck cart that I'll show you. Thank you, Jim, for these pictures. Jim gave me these. Plenty of shops, plenty of places to get a coffee, to eat, plenty of hotels. This is a tourist town. There was one lady when we first got there, and she was in a wheelchair. I don't recommend it. It's very steep. She was scared, and the person pushing her was scared. This hand truck, this green hand truck that this gentleman's on, that's how they get durable goods from the train up to the hill to the businesses. And you saw lots of people like with the motorized hand trucks bringing things to and from. And then on the other side of this train track, I don't know if this is salt, but plenty of bags of stuff. I don't quite know what that was. But that was Machu Picchu town. Really very touristy, but very clean. They had a river running through it. It was pretty amazing. This was our train ride out of Machu Picchu. Train took about 2 hours to get back to where our ride was. And the attendants on the train modeled various sweaters, alpaca sweaters. There are many, many shops in Peru where you can buy a beautiful sweater. And the attendants on the train were wearing the different sweaters. They'd model them, show you how to wear like a different scarf a different way or a sweater a different way. And then this young lady, I don't quite know the story behind that girl, so I can't really make one up, but well, I could, but you don't want me to. But anyway, she was on the train also, and so that was this was our last day at Machu Picchu, and we were leaving. The last thing I want to talk about, well, kind of the last thing, I got one more thing to talk about that I remembered afterwards, was I want to tell everybody about the toilets in Peru, because I didn't really know about the toilets in Peru until I got there. But the toilets anywhere in Peru are very rustic. You do not flush the toilet paper when you're in Peru. And I went to Beaver Kill Campground in the Catskills. and it's outside of New York City. And I went like Labor Day weekend with my friend hiking, and in that bathroom that day was this huge pile of toilet paper. And I thought to myself, how disgusting is that nobody's flushing the toilet paper? And then I realized after going to Peru that many of the people who use Beaver Kill Campground are probably from South or Central America, and they don't flush the toilet paper. That's just their custom. So if you go to Peru, make sure you bring your own toilet paper. Guys, you probably need that too, but women especially. And then on the trail, that last day when we were on the trail, the toilets were not really toilets, they were holes. So they were, you go in, you'd have a stall, and there's a hole in the ground. And that's where you had to pee or do whatever you needed to do. You don't flush the paper. You put it in the garbage can. And then there's a rope. And luckily for me, I was here and I pulled the rope, and the water comes from the ceiling and whoosh, and it cleans everything right down the hole. And I did not know about that. Nobody told me about it. The guides didn't tell me about it. The people, the pack paddle ski people did not educate me about the toilets, so I'm educating you in case you go. Watch out for that water because you will get an unintentional shower. And then the last thing I want to tell you folks about is FA gave us, he gave us, this is a symbol of Peru, and it's a little necklace that I have, and it's four-sided, and it's got some edges to it, and then it's got a circle in the middle. And he gave this to us, and he told us that we are the person in the middle. We have to always try to think of ourselves first, but think of our community also. And the community is important, and when we put all of our pendants together, they all fit together perfectly. You need community to have richness in your life. I want you folks to know that Peru is an amazing country to go to. Peru, the people in Peru are super friendly, very kind, very generous, and it was a really wonderful place to visit. When I came back, I was so happy because people in Peru are happy. They're not lonely. They have a sense of community, and they have a sense of helping one another. And it's something that, even though we have a lot of things in the United States, sometimes we don't have a lot of that, especially right now. So I was very, very grateful for my trip to Peru, and thank you for sharing and coming tonight.
Luke, can you get the lights? Okay, we got time for some questions. We'll get the lights turned on. Anybody got questions for Patty or Jim? Yeah. You can speak in the microphone, that way everyone will be able to hear your question.
Did Rick French lead the hike? Okay, so you went with him. What was the cost of it?
Oh, so I should let you guys know, it is, I think it was $3,500 for this trip. We had to do our own airfare to Peru. And if people do want to go to Peru, I've been in touch with FA, and he'd be willing to guide us, not this April, but next April. He says April is a really good time to go because it is their fall, and the flowers and the birds are really beautiful in the fall. So if folks would like to go to Peru, we can go. I don't know the cost of that because we would not be using pack paddle ski, so it would probably be less, but I'm not quite sure.
How many days were you gone?
We were on the trail for 4 days. We were in Peru for 2 weeks.
It was about 7 miles a day.
miles a day. But boy, that second day was... Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Did you try the national drink of pisco sour? Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Okay.
Okay, thanks Patty and Jim, great presentation. Have a good night, everybody.